When I was a child, I never imagined that the boy I loved most in the world would one day leave me shattered. Nor did I think the person who would take him away was my greatest rival, someone who thrived on outshining me in every corner of my life. Yet, here I am, looking back at a story I never thought I'd tell. As I reflect, I can't help but smile. Their betrayal nearly broke me, but it also became the foundation of my strength. I grew up in a small, close-knit town where everyone knew everyone. My childhood was simple, filled with laughter, innocence, and Aaron. He wasn't just my best friend, he was my first love, though I never told him. Aaron had this warmth, this charm, that made him the center of every room he walked into. From the moment we met in second grade, we were inseparable partners in every childhood adventure, the kind of bond you think will last forever. But then there was Emma. Emma was everything I wasn't: captivating, effortlessly talented, and always in the spotlight. She was my rival in every sense of the word. If I achieved something, Emma had already done it better. If I shined for a moment, she was right there, basking in a brighter glow. Over time, I learned to live with it, but it was exhausting being constantly compared to her. Through all of that, Aaron was my anchor. He didn't care about my rivalry with Emma or her perfect facade. He merely saw me. Or at least, that's what I believed. But things started to change in high school. Emma began taking an interest in Aaron, and not the casual kind. It was deliberate, calculated. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter. Aaron and I had years of shared memories. He wouldn't just forget all of that. But he did. Slowly, he pulled away. The texts became fewer, our conversations shorter, and the connection that had always been there started to fade. I told myself it was nothing, but deep down, I knew the truth. Emma had done what she always did: stepped into my life and taken something that mattered to me. The day I found out they were dating felt like my world had collapsed. I still remember it vividly. I was waiting for Aaron at our favorite cafe, a spot we'd claimed as kids. He was late, which wasn't like him. Then I saw them. Aaron and Emma walked in together, hand in hand, laughing like they shared a secret the world wasn't privy to. My heart sank, but I tried to keep it together. When Aaron introduced her to me as his girlfriend, it was as if time stopped. I nodded, forced a smile, and muttered something polite, but inside, I was crumbling. The betrayal wasn't just about losing Aaron as a love interest, it was losing my best friend to the one person who had always overshadowed me. For weeks, I existed in a fog. I felt hollow, consumed by the pain of being cast aside. Aaron and Emma were everywhere: at school, at events, in the places Aaron and I used to share. It felt unbearable, but amidst that heartbreak, something shifted. I realized I couldn't live my life defined by their choices. I couldn't let their actions dictate my worth. That realization didn't happen overnight. It took time, tears, and a lot of self-reflection. But it sparked something inside me, a fire I didn't know I had. I decided to prove to myself, and maybe even to them, that I was more than the girl they left behind. Their betrayal wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of something new. In the weeks following Aaron and Emma's betrayal, I struggled to find my footing. Every corner of my small town seemed to remind me of what I had lost. The cafe where Aaron and I had spent hours dreaming about the future now felt foreign, and every passing glimpse of Emma's smug smile was a dagger to my heart. It felt like I was living in a shadow cast by their relationship, by their happiness, and by my own self-doubt. But somewhere in that fog of despair, a small spark ignited. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was quiet, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a whisper telling me I couldn't let this define me. I began to focus on myself, though at first, it was more out of necessity than a grand plan for transformation. I threw myself into my studies, spending late nights at the library, immersing myself in books and ideas that took me far from the suffocating confines of my town. It wasn't just a distraction, it was a lifeline. Slowly, I started to see the world beyond Aaron, beyond Emma, and beyond the small, predictable life I thought I was destined to live. I realized that the greatest revenge wasn't to hurt them back, but to build a life so fulfilling that their absence wouldn't even matter. The real turning point came during a school event, a career fair of sorts. I wandered through the booths aimlessly, not expecting much. But then I found myself at a table showcasing prestigious universities and scholarships. A representative was speaking about opportunities abroad, and as I listened, something clicked. For the first time, I felt a sense of possibility, a vision of a future where I wasn't the girl left behind, but someone who had moved forward. It was a future I wanted desperately, and I decided I would do whatever it took to make it happen. From that moment, I worked tirelessly. My grades, already decent, became exceptional. I took on part-time jobs, saving every penny for applications and entrance exams. I joined clubs, volunteered, and built a resume that would make me stand out. Every late night and early morning felt like a step closer to freedom, a step away from the hurt and betrayal that had once consumed me. Aaron and Emma were still a part of my world. Their relationship paraded around like a trophy, but I no longer cared. My focus was elsewhere, on a dream they couldn't touch. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were setbacks, moments of doubt when the weight of everything felt too much to bear. But in those moments, I thought about what had brought me to this point. The heartbreak, the tears, the realization that I deserved more, it all fueled me. I wasn't running away from the past. I was running toward a future I could call my own. I began to see myself not as the girl who had been cast aside, but as someone capable of creating something extraordinary out of the ashes. The day I received my first acceptance letter was the day I realized I was finally free. I held the envelope in my hands, my heart pounding as I read the words that confirmed I had been accepted to a top university abroad. It was more than just an academic achievement, it was a symbol of everything I had fought for. For the first time in years, I felt light, as though the chains that had bound me to my past had finally been broken. As I packed my bags and prepared to leave the town that had been both my sanctuary and my prison, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was sadness. Of course, leaving behind familiar faces and places was never easy. But there was also an undeniable excitement, a sense of anticipation for the life that awaited me. I knew I was stepping into the unknown, but for the first time, it didn't scare me. It thrilled me. What I didn't realize then was that my journey was just beginning. While I was preparing to embrace my future, Aaron and Emma were still deeply entangled in the small world I was leaving behind. And though I didn't know it yet, the choices they had made, the ones that had once broken me, were about to come back to haunt them in ways they couldn't have imagined. Stepping off the plane into a new country felt like entering an entirely different universe. The air was crisp, the city bustling with life, and the possibilities seemed endless. For the first time, I was truly on my own, with no one to overshadow me, no familiar faces to remind me of the person I used to be. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. I had left behind the town where my heartbreak began, and now I was determined to build something entirely my own. University life was a whirlwind. Surrounded by people from every corner of the world, I found myself immersed in cultures, ideas, and conversations I had never experienced before. I worked harder than ever, balancing demanding coursework with part-time jobs and networking events. I wasn't just studying for a degree, I was crafting a new version of myself, one that was confident, independent, and unshaken by the past. The more I grew, the more I realized how small my old world had been. Aaron and Emma, once central to my life, began to feel like distant memories. Occasionally, I'd see updates on social media, pictures of their perfect smiles and shared milestones. They had gotten married not long after I left, and their lives seemed like a picture-perfect fairy tale. But rather than stirring bitterness, those updates only fueled my resolve. I wasn't running from them anymore. I was running towards something bigger. Opportunities started to unfold in ways I could never have imagined. I secured an internship with a prestigious firm, one that allowed me to apply my skills and build connections with influential people. My work ethic and determination didn't go unnoticed. By the time I graduated, I had not only earned my degree with honors, but also landed a high-profile job offer that would catapult me into a career I had only dreamed of. The girl who had once been overlooked was now commanding attention and respect. But success wasn't just about the accolades. It was about the person I had become. I learned to appreciate my own company, to trust my instincts, and to celebrate my achievements without needing validation from anyone else. I found friendships that were genuine, relationships that were built on mutual respect, and a sense of purpose that made every challenge worth it. While I was thriving, cracks began to form in the life Aaron and Emma had built together. Though I wasn't actively keeping tabs on them, news from mutual acquaintances occasionally reached me. Their perfect facade was starting to crumble. Emma, who had always seemed so polished and poised, was reportedly struggling to adapt to the realities of marriage. The spark that had once captivated Aaron seemed to be fading, replaced by tension and conflict. Aaron, too, was no longer the confident boy I had once adored. From what I heard, he was working a monotonous job, far removed from the dreams we used to talk about as kids. The passion and ambition that had once defined him seemed to have withered away, leaving behind a man who was merely going through the motions. It wasn't long before whispers of trouble in their marriage began to circulate. I didn't revel in their struggles, nor did I feel pity. Instead, I felt a quiet sense of detachment. Their choices had brought them to where they were, just as mine had brought me to where I was. For the first time, I truly understood the power of moving on, not just physically, but emotionally. I had let go of the pain they caused me, and in doing so, I had freed myself from their shadow. Then came the moment that would change everything. I was invited to speak at a prestigious conference, sharing my journey and the insights I had gained along the way. It was a career milestone, one that would put me in the spotlight in ways I had never anticipated. Little did I know, this event would also bring Aaron and Emma back into my life, in the most unexpected way. The conference was a grand affair, the kind of event I never imagined myself attending, let alone speaking at. Industry leaders, innovators, and visionaries filled the hall, and I was set to take the stage as one of the keynote speakers. Standing behind the curtain, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. From that small-town girl with a broken heart to someone commanding the attention of an audience like this, it felt surreal. When my name was announced, the applause was overwhelming. Walking onto the stage, I took a deep breath and began to speak. I shared my journey, not as a tale of vengeance or bitterness, but as a story of resilience and self-discovery. I spoke about how life's greatest challenges often lead to our greatest transformations. As I glanced across the sea of faces, I could see people nodding, smiling, and connecting with my words. It was a moment of pure validation, not for them, but for me. After my speech, I mingled with attendees, soaking in their feedback and sharing conversations that felt both meaningful and inspiring. It was during this moment of celebration that I spotted them, Aaron and Emma. They stood near the back of the room, partially hidden but unmistakably present. My breath caught for a moment, but I quickly composed myself. This wasn't the time to falter. If anything, their presence only affirmed how far I had risen. Emma looked striking as always, but there was a strain in her demeanor, a tension that no amount of makeup or forced smiles could hide. Aaron, on the other hand, seemed like a ghost of his former self. His once bright and confident eyes were clouded, and his posture lacked the effortless ease I remembered. For a fleeting moment, I wondered why they were here. But the answer became clear: this was no coincidence. They had come to see me. Our eyes met across the room, and it was Aaron who broke the silence. He approached cautiously, as if unsure of his welcome. Emma trailed behind, her gaze flickering between him and me. When Aaron finally stood in front of me, he opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The weight of whatever he wanted to say seemed to crush him. Emma, ever the bold one, stepped in. "You've done well for yourself," she said, her tone carrying a forced politeness. "We've been following your success." I nodded, keeping my response measured. "Thank you. It's been quite a journey." There was an awkward pause, and for a moment, none of us seemed to know what to say. It was Emma who broke the silence again. "You know, Aaron always said you were smart, that you'd go far." Her words sounded rehearsed, like she had practiced them before approaching me. Aaron finally spoke, his voice quieter than I remembered. "I am proud of you, Sarah. You've become everything I always knew you could be." The sincerity in his words caught me off guard, but it didn't stir the emotions I expected. There was no longing, no bitterness, no desire to rewind time. Instead, there was only a calm acceptancy recognition that the Aaron standing before me was no longer the boy I had loved. He was someone else entirely, shaped by choices that had taken him down a different path. Emma, however, seemed uneasy. Her composure cracked as she looked between us, perhaps sensing the shift in power dynamics. "It must be nice," she said, her voice laced with an edge, "to have all of this." She gestured vaguely at the conference hall, her envy barely concealed. I met her gaze evenly. "It is," I said simply. "But it's not about the success or the recognition. It's about finding peace, about knowing my worth, and living a life I am proud of." Emma's expression faltered, and for a moment, I saw something in her eyes I had never seen before: regret. Whether it was for her choices or for approaching me today, I couldn't tell. Aaron, meanwhile, looked as though he wanted to say more, but I didn't give him the chance. "I wish you both well," I said firmly, signaling that our conversation had reached its end. As I turned to walk away, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Not anger, not triumph, just closure. The chapter that had begun with heartbreak and betrayal was finally over. I had faced the people who once defined my pain, and I had emerged unshaken. For the first time, I truly understood that my story had never been about them. It had always been about me. After our brief and final conversation, I thought that would be the last time Aaron and Emma would cross my mind. I had closed the chapter, walked away with my head held high, and was ready to focus on my future. But life, as it often does, had other plans. Their lives, which had seemed so perfect from a distance, began unraveling in ways neither of them could have predicted, and I became an unwilling witness to their collapse. Not long after the conference, whispers began to surface about cracks in Aaron and Emma's marriage. At first, they were subtle small comments from mutual acquaintances, occasional mentions on social media that hinted at tension, but soon, the whispers grew louder. Aaron and Emma, once the picture-perfect couple, were now the subject of gossip and speculation. Their polished facade was crumbling, and the world was starting to see the truth. I didn't seek out the details, but they seemed to find me regardless. Friends from back home would call or text, eager to share the latest updates. Emma had become increasingly volatile, struggling to maintain the image she had built for herself. Her jealousy and insecurity, which had once been weapons she wielded so effectively, now turned inward, consuming her from within. Aaron, meanwhile, seemed lost, caught between trying to salvage their relationship and dealing with his own regrets. One day, a former classmate reached out, telling me that Aaron had confided in him during a chance encounter. "He talked about you," the classmate said hesitantly. "He said he messed up, that he never should have let you go." I listened quietly, feeling nothing but a detached curiosity. Aaron's regret wasn't surprising, it was inevitable. But it no longer held any power over me. What did surprise me was Emma's reaction to my success. As I continued to grow in my career, my name began appearing in places they couldn't ignore: articles, interviews, even awards ceremonies. Emma, who had always thrived on being the center of attention, couldn't bear it. She started comparing herself to me, obsessing over my achievements, and questioning her own worth. It was ironic, really. The woman who had once overshadowed me now found herself in my shadow. Their downfall reached its peak when a video surfaced online, a candid moment captured at a social event. In it, Emma was visibly distraught, arguing with Aaron in front of a small crowd. "She's everything you wanted me to be, isn't she?" Emma's voice cracked, her anger barely masking the hurt underneath. Aaron, looking defeated, didn't respond. The video went viral, sparking a flurry of comments and speculation. People who had once admired them as a couple now saw them as two broken individuals, clinging to a relationship built on shallow foundations. When I saw the video, I felt a twinge of sadness, not for them, but for the years I had spent letting their actions dictate my worth. They had taken so much from me, yet here I was, standing strong while they crumbled. Their choices, their betrayals, they no longer defined me. I had risen above it all. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work with renewed focus. My company was expanding into new markets, and I was leading initiatives that challenged me in ways I never thought possible. Every success was a reminder of how far I had come, of the life I had built from the ground up. Aaron and Emma's struggles were no longer my concern. They were simply echoes of a past I had left behind. But life has a way of bringing closure in unexpected ways. One evening, as I was leaving my office, I received a message from Aaron. It was short, almost desperate. "Can we talk? I need to explain." For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but then I realized I didn't need to hear his explanation. I already knew everything I needed to. I replied with a single word: number. That simple act of refusing to engage felt like the final piece of closure I didn't know I needed. Aaron and Emma had made their choices, and I had made mine. My path was forward, free from the shadows of the past. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. As time passed, I rarely thought of Aaron or Emma anymore. Their chapter in my life had closed so firmly that even their occasional attempts to reach out felt like faint echoes from a distant past. My focus was solely on the present and the future I was building. Each day brought new challenges, new opportunities, and new milestones. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving in ways I never could have imagined. One crisp morning, I stood on the balcony of my new home, overlooking a city that had once seemed impossibly out of reach. The skyline shimmered in the early light, a perfect metaphor for how far I had come. My aunt, who had been my rock during the hardest times, joined me with a cup of tea in hand. She had flown in for a visit, and seeing her in my space, surrounded by the life I had created, filled me with a quiet sense of pride. "You've done well, Sarah," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "I always knew you had it in you." Her words brought a lump to my throat. My aunt had seen me at my lowest, had lifted me when I couldn't lift myself. And now, she was here to share in the joy of my success. I turned to her with a smile. "I couldn't have done it without you." Later that day, I received an invitation to another prestigious event. This time, I would be the keynote speaker for an international summit on innovation and leadership. It was the kind of opportunity that once would have intimidated me, but now, it felt like a natural step forward. As I prepared my speech, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. I thought about the heartbreak that had once consumed me, the betrayal that had nearly crushed my spirit. But more than that, I thought about the strength I had found within myself, the determination to rise above, to carve out a life defined by my own choices rather than the actions of others. I realized that every setback, every tear, every sleepless night had been a stepping stone to this moment. The summit was held in a stunning venue, with delegates and leaders from all over the world in attendance. As I stepped onto the stage, I felt a familiar rush of nerves, but it was quickly replaced by confidence. I spoke from the heart, sharing not just my professional journey but the personal struggles that had shaped me. I didn't dwell on Aaron or Amethyst, wasn't their story anymore. It was mine. After the speech, I was approached by countless attendees, each one eager to share how my words had inspired them. Among them was a young woman who reminded me of myself years ago, uncertain, searching for direction, but full of potential. She told me that my story had given her hope, that she finally felt ready to pursue her dreams. Her words touched me deeply, a reminder that our struggles often serve a purpose far greater than ourselves. As I left the summit, I felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. Life wasn't perfect, it never is, but it was mine. I had built it with resilience, with courage, and with the unwavering belief that I deserved more than what the past had offered me. Aaron and Emma's lives, once so entangled with mine, had faded into the background. Their struggles, their regrets, their choices, they were no longer my concern. Months later, I received word that Emma had moved back to our hometown, quietly retreating from the life she had once flaunted. Aaron, too, had disappeared from the public eye. Their fairy tale crumbled into nothing more than a cautionary tale. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall, only a quiet resolve to keep moving forward.